It's day one of our tiny house build, and today we've got the team from BioBuild here who's going to be showing you how to put down a tiny house floor. So if you remember from our previous videos, the way that we've designed our trailer is that the trailer itself becomes the floor joists. So whereas in many tiny houses what they do is they put a floor over the trailer and then build wooden joists up from the top, our trailer has been designed in a way that it's ready to directly accept the floor on the top of it. So the wood that we've chosen to use for our tiny house floor is a tongue and groove Lawson cypress. This here is sustainably sourced in New Zealand. Our tongue and groove Lawson cypress boards are 21mm thick. Now that's an ideal span for a strength to weight ratio for the joists here, which are separated at 600mm centers. So let's have a chat to Alan and get things started.
Good morning, I'm Alan Drayton, and today we're going to be putting the floor on the trailer. Helping me is Sarah and Dylan. I'll be talking with Bryce a little bit about how we're going to go about that, get a few details clear. So the key points today are that we need to separate the floor from the trailer. So for that we're going to use a damp-proof course. We're actually going to glue it down so it takes up a little bit any anomalies in the galvanizing. We're going to screw the floor down. So we'll do a rundown of the tools that we're required to put the floor onto the trailer. It kind of depends on what tools you have available to yourself. So we need to be able to cut the boards, and that can be everything from hand done. A good sharp handsaw is always handy. For ripping along the board, you can use a bench saw, or what we're using today is a circular saw. That's this thing down here. And instead of using a handsaw to cut the boards with the joins, we're using what we call a drop saw, which is this thing over here. Of course, it's always important with any of these tools that you undertake to use that you know how to use them safely. And you have the personal protection equipment that you need, ear muffs, decent set of boots, and you'll see over on the bench there the yellow box. That's our earth leakage circuit breaker, which makes sure that we're safe to use any of the electrics we use. The only other thing we need is something to put the screws in with. So we've got a number of drills over here. You can do with one, but then we find we're changing from the pilot hole to the drill bit to the screw bit. So we're lucky enough to have plenty of drills. We're obviously needing, something like a standard builder's apron. You're going to need to measure. You're going to need to mark. We're using this for making square lines, adjusting it so that we can use it to mark our screw centers. And a straight edge is always helpful to do things like bringing our straight line of our screws across as well. Other than that, a broom to tidy up with, and a rubbish bin. So today when we put the trailer down, we're actually going to put some Gorilla Fix All on here, which is a bead of sealant come glue, and then we'll use that to stick the damp-proof course down. So we're creating a separation layer. The Fix All will help the DPC behave itself, but also help us just get over these little bumps.
Yep.
And keep it nice and flat.
I'm Sarah. I work for Alan Drayton of BioBuild. I'm a natural house builder. We build really cool round earth and mud brick houses using all natural materials. Because the contact with the timber and the metal can be a place where condensation can build up, so we're going to have to protect that contact. So first we're going to glue this onto the frame before we start cutting the timber and fixing that in place. It's quite simple. So I'm going to nick the knife and give you the belt.
Wow, look at that. I'm like a real builder
Saddling
now.
up.
What's happening? I don't recognize you. Where'd that belt come from?
I'm all mad now.
What am I?
Wow, look at it. Oh, good point. Oh, no.
High five, Sarah.
So we're applying the Fix-All, which is going to glue down the DPC, the damp-proof course, with black paper.
Because we need access to the steel C channel, from the bottom so that we can actually bolt the framing down on top of it, we're going to be laying the top part of the floor down first. The whole frame of the house will go up, and it's actually not until one of the very last stages of our build that our floor insulation and the steel plate at the bottom holding that insulation will be attached to the trailer.
You get the chance to shift it around a bit. Crank it up onto the weld so that
Right.
if the timber does touch the weld, it's not going to contact with the metal.
Right.
I'm just smoothing down the glue so that the top surface is flat, because that glue will stay proud if you don't squash it down.
In some ways, after spending so long designing and building such an incredible trailer, it almost feels like a shame to be covering it up. Then again, it's going to be much cooler as a tiny house.
So that worked really well, gluing down the DPC. It's all nice and securely on the frame. So now we have to start putting timber on. So I've measured the width of the trailer and the width between the arches and divided that between the width of the tongue and groove. Of course, just the top part, not the tongue part, which means that we've got about 26 boards plus 40 mil. So this is the timber that we're using, Lawson Cypress. Ideally in this situation, which is close to the ground, we want to use the Hart timber. Hart Lawson Cypress is equivalent to an H3.1 timber treatment. And there's regulations in New Zealand which determine which level of treatment you need for a timber used in certain situations. For instance, the more exposed to the weather it is, the higher the treatment. So a timber post which goes into the ground is the maximum treatment, which is H5. Lawson Cypress here, if it's the heartwood, it's naturally equivalent to an H3.1 treated timber, which is used in situations which get intermittently wet. Sapwood is not as hardy as heartwood, and we want the hardy timber for the floor of the trailer, which is going to be exposed to some degree. So we're looking to use heart for the floor. Now heart is the timber which is closest to the centre of the tree, and sap is near the outside. So I've just cut this piece of timber so they can see the rings. I can see the rings go that way, so the heart is somewhere over here. And the sap is obviously always near the outermost part of the tree. Now, as I look underneath the timber, I see a slight dark line there. And as I look down, you can see indeed there's some bark. So this is definitely sap on that corner, and the bark confirms that. So we'll put this piece aside for now, and hopefully in this timber that we've got, we'll find enough that's all just heart for the floor of this trailer. And of course we can use the sapwood inside for joinery and cabinetry and things like that. For the first piece, we're also looking for a straight bit of timber, because that will set where all the others are. If we have a curved piece of timber later on, we can clamp it to the straight bit. So this one, because we've actually got the heart in this piece of timber, we're pretty safe that the sap's probably out here somewhere. So I don't see any signs of sap. It's all the same colour all the way along, so this is our first piece of timber.
Lawson's is reputed to be the strongest softwood in the world. So weight for strength, it's incredibly strong. High tensile strength, so you can bend it and it bounces back. It's got that spring. That's tensile strength. So it's equivalent to aeroplane ash or something like that when it's in the clear form. So they used it in the aeroplane industry for building aeroplanes in the old days.
Right.
But it was only a few timbers have been allowed to be used for aeroplanes, and this was one of them. The reason why, because it's light and it can stand that shatter or being knocked about or banged into it. You know?
Fantastic.
All the pull and push in it. So I thought in this situation, you've got something you want light, semi-aeronautical.
Almost. I think it'll be able to fly at the end of it.
Yeah. So you want it to fly, you use a light, strong wood. And it's a wood that, if it's in heartwood like this, doesn't require treatment. It dries real easy.
Yep.
Easy to nail. So you've got a timber that is a natural timber, just straight out of the tree, process it, mill it, give it a bit of drying time and it's ready to use.
Righto.
You can forget about all the chemicals in it. And it'll still stand up and still be there in 100 years' time.
Absolutely. What more could you want?
Yeah. And
If it's good enough for an aeroplane, it's good enough for our tiny house.
That's right.
So setting up a datum line, which is a line which is the same spacing all the way along the trailer, so we can use that to line up the boards to make sure they're all straight.
Just clamping a board to here so we can establish a string line for the starting plank in order to get it straight, as opposed to try to do it visually.
So I'm just going to measure the same distance here that we've got at the other side. And so now we're making sure all the boards are parallel to that. So this is the first line that's gone in, so we're making sure that's dead straight and well fixed, and then all the other boards can be clamped up, and theoretically, although you have to keep checking, it should mean that everything ends up straight.
So the screws that we're using for this are from Fortress Fasteners. Now these are specially designed for this kind of application. These are zinc coated, which means we don't have to worry about corrosion or anything in the trailer, which is really important when it's going into steel. Now, this is designed to create a pilot hole in the wood so that the rest of the screw here doesn't actually bite down on the wood itself. What it does though is these break off when it hits the steel, which means as soon as it hits the steel, this part bites and it screws in and fastens this head of the screw here, holding that wood in place. When you're trying to figure out how many screws you're going to need for this project, the first thing that you need to know is how wide your trailer is. Our trailer is 2,400 millimeters or 2.4 meters. What you then need to calculate is the width of each and every one of the tongue and groove boards that you're going to be using. In our case, our tongue and groove Lawson Cypress boards are 83 millimeters. So what you do is you divide the 2,400 millimeters by 83. In our case, we get roughly 29 floorboards across the entire length of the trailer. From that point, we know that for each and every one of those floorboards, we're going to need 2 screws per joist. So each and every line of the joist, we're going to need roughly 58 screws. What you then need to know is how many joists you have. In the case of our trailer, including the end members, we have 12 joists across. So then we take that 58 that we need per joist and times it by 12. That figure comes out at 696 screws, which means in theory we should be able to get away with using about 700 screws on the trailer. But you never buy only 700 screws. Always make sure that you pick up at least 100 more screws than you think you're going to need, because you always end up using more.
Obviously you don't want your screw to be too close to the groove, so we've chosen a spacing that takes it inside the groove but isn't too close together, because we've got 2 screws, and if the board's just held in the middle, there's a chance it could cup up at the edge.
First of all, we're using the plug hole cutter. And just quickly drilling the plug. Once that's done, the screw itself does all of the drilling into the frame and the wood. Simple as that.
And it's going to end up putting the screw down about that deep, and then we're going to make a plug that goes on the top. So instead of seeing the screw, you'll see a little circle, a little plug of Lawson Cypress here and here, and that'll make it look a little bit more like a boat deck rather than a screwed down floor.
That's good.
Babe, our first screw's in.
And yes, milestone moments.
We're currently clamping 3 planks at a time for expedience, as well as getting able to set that group of 3 in a straighter line, basically.
When you're laying tongue and groove flooring, you need to have some way of tightening the boards up.
Yeah.
And traditionally, with a wooden joist here, we'd have a cramp that bites in and you turn it, it's like a vice, and it pushes and pushes and pushes, and you get it really tight. Well, because we've got metal, we can't do that. So the next thing builders commonly do is what we call chisel cramp, where you get something that stops the board getting damaged, this board here, and this is the board we can damage. We get our chisel out, push that up a bit, bang our chisel into the joist or rafter and squeeze, and that levering action pushes it forward. Well, we can't do that either.
Right.
So here we just have a backing board, something to press off, and so each time I'm cutting these shorter and shorter. Again, my damage protection board, or block if you like, and I've cut that, and there we are, nice and tight. So I'm guessing at that, if I get it wrong, I can put in a wedge to tighten it a little bit, or cut it a little bit shorter, but basically I'll just put some of these through, every second one, or wherever they're needed, and I'll squeeze this whole thing up, then I'll sight it to a straight line, and then I'll get you to put one screw in each one, and then finish off down your lines while I carry on working up towards the edge.
Fantastic. So Alan, it was pretty simple over that side, but how are we going to tackle this real well?
Okay, well, it's actually simpler than it looks. And the reason for that is that when you have a tongue and groove floor, whenever you come to an edge, you need to leave room for expansion.
Right.
So if we were to cut the piece of wood tight there, then yes, it would be difficult to get this in and turn it down, because it would be getting caught on that. But in actual fact, what I'm going to do is, instead of measuring the distance to the actual board, I'm just going to measure the distance to the tongue, or even a little bit less.
Right.
I'm going to transfer that over to here. I've got the board laid where I want it.
Yep.
So at this point here, it doesn't have to be the same measurement. Usually means things are correct if it's not. I'm going to measure that there, and I'm going to transfer that distance to here, mark it with a straight edge and cut it, so it'll actually drop in and then push forward, leaving a gap the size of the tongue here, which is exactly what I need, and that'll enable the floor to expand and contract as it wishes, and it will.
Nice and easy.
Yeah, nice and easy.
And I suppose it's okay for there to be a gap there as well, because in the end this is all going to be covered in cabinetry anyway.
Exactly, and in a housing situation, if this was a wall, then the skirting covers that little gap that you leave on purpose.
Righty.
Yep, minimum 5 mils, usually nice if you can leave around about 10, depending on the size of the floor.
Yep.
Because each board has expansion potential.
Sure.
We don't actually have a 3 or 4 metre size house room here.
Right.
So in other words, even though this will expand, it won't expand as much as a floor that was 3 or 4 metres long might.
Yep.
So, you know, a small gap, maybe the size of your pencil, is plenty. And that's about the size of the tongue too.
Yeah, great, great. It's taken us and the team about a day and a half of solid work to get to this point, but as you can see, our beautiful tongue and groove Lawson Cypress floor is very, very nearly finished. What we now need to do to finish the project is cut the plugs and fit them snugly into the floor to give it that really nice finished look. We're going to be showing you how to do that in our next video. See you then.